we said that in Darul Kufr, this is not going to be possible. But actually, even in Darul Islam, since so much is being imported from the kuffar, it's
Well,
already
if you eat imported food, it'll be a problem.
sure.
It's one thing if you live locally and you eat, what your mom makes or whatever else,
Yeah,
and you probably won't be exposed to it.
that's true.
But if you decide sometimes, hey guys, let's go out to Pizza Hut, or hey, I want to really try Reese's Pieces, or I want to have a Milky Way a day because it says it helps me work, rest, and play. So when you buy that Milky Way, or if you decide to buy a Mr. Pibb or a Dr. Pepper, or whatever other things,
Yeah.
those things have been imported. And so whatever things that govern importation of those foods, you'll be exposed to.
Most of the stuff that we in my country have selling, that's all imported from Russia. So I mean, like,
and whatever Russian laws
yeah,
govern over the food industry will be implemented on whatever foods you're eating.
yeah. So I mean, like, even if someone say, I'm gonna go to Darul Islam, that's it, but it's still not.
Yeah, it's still not, depending on what you do.
Exactly.
If you decide to live rural, okay, you're away from it. Or if you say, hey, I don't go out to eat, I only eat home cooked meals, or I eat from local businesses, you probably get away with it. You'll probably be fine. But if you decide to live in a city where you enjoy the nightlife, or you work at a restaurant, or you open a business and you go out for a company lunch, you most certainly will be exposed to this stuff.
Yeah.
And you have to live with the reality that that's the case. And so knowing that that's the case, you have to say, so how do I deal with this then? Knowing that that's the case, you then ask yourself, how do I deal with it now? Okay, what can I do? Knowing what I know now and understanding the way that things are, how do I go forward? It's not all lost where it's like, oh, that's it now, it's done for. No, exactly. It's not lost. It's how do you deal with it knowing this knowledge? Because carrying things to their end, as I've been doing, won't be enough. I need additional details. Okay. Alhamdulillah, Allah reward you. I need additional help. Okay. Well, look, try these rulings. I gave you a hadith. I gave you ayat. I gave you the amal of the first 3 generations. Right? There it is. So it's something it's mustanid. It's not like I'm just telling you what are you going to do. I tried to give some solutions. Look, here's some mustanid things. Maybe this will be of use to you. If you decide not to, fine. But at least it's here. So in case there's an incident that someone finds him or herself in, he can carry it out. Because I tell you, everywhere that I've been, I keep finding the same situation.
Yes.
And it's an unsettling thing, because Muslims are always worried and freaked out. But there's a part of this where they need to say, I can't be freaked out because I can't control it. Some of the stuff that you can control, you worry about. The stuff you can't control, you don't. Stuff you can't control, you don't. So I can worry about rising water table or rising water levels in the town I live in and try to do something about stopping. But can I do something about rising water levels in Dhaka, Bangladesh? No, I don't live in Bangladesh. I have to deal with what I deal with locally. I can't deal with Bangladesh. I got to deal with what I deal with locally. And those are the cold realities. But you live in Dar al-Kufr and you try to act as if you're living in Dar al-Islam in the countryside or your local town or village, you're not going to make it. And if you do, you're going to put hardships on yourself that you cannot balance. And you'll find yourself being angry a lot of the time, which you shouldn't be. Because you placed that constraint upon yourself.
Yeah.
It takes, one person, oh yeah, I know the ingredients. No, you don't. You ask for the comprehensive ingredients list. That's everything. From the beginning of its manufacture, when it was first made, all the way till it reaches your plate. That's everything. The general ingredients list is just what you're seeing. Okay, listen, this is the majority of the product what we got here. That's not every single thing. So people have to, some of the Muslims have to start considering things in reality.
Absolutely.
And understanding things, and don't persecute brothers, because it's another thing. Don't persecute brothers for not following those strict rulings when they're not obligated to.
Exactly.
So brothers, because it was a situation on the West Coast, brothers, if they saw that you had something that had animal rented in there, brothers, they persecuted you or they treated you a certain way. And when it started happening to me, I started becoming aggressive towards them. Because you're not going to tell me, oh yeah, you're eating haram. No, you're eating haram. Let me tell you about what you ate yesterday. And then all of a sudden people started to get, because it's like, I don't respond well to that type of stuff. If you say, listen, I follow the stricter ruling. Okay. All right. That's fine.
Yeah.
But don't come where there's something that's not mujma' alayh. It's not mujma' alayh. Something where there's agreed upon by consensus. Yes. You do inkar, you rebuke people for leaving. Yes, that's true. But it's not mujma' alayh.
Right.
Fins and scales is not mujma' alayh. Animal rennet is not mujma' alayh. Rejecting the principle of istibdaal regarding contaminants is not mujma' alayh. So understand that.
I wanted to ask you, since you explained this issue on the ingredients, could you just once more simplify it and just explain that people just understand clearly what you mentioned about the 5 first ingredients? Could you just explain it once more by simplify it, so that people get a very good picture of this?
So when you go to a local store or shop and you pick up an item of food and you read on the ingredients list, the first 4 or 5 ingredients are the majority of that product.
Right.
Everything after that is less than 5%, which means it's nowhere near the majority of that product. Whatever's below that threshold of 5% is still there, but it's not required to be on the general ingredients list. So you have to send a letter to the manufacturer and ask for a comprehensive ingredients list. We're not obliged to worry about the comprehensive ingredients. We're not obliged for worrying about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1% for contaminants.
Right.
We're not obliged to worry when something's undergone istibdaal, like in the case of vinegar, like in the case of the animal rennet and cheese. We're not responsible for that. What we're responsible for is the majority and all of a product. And we have to be mindful of this.
So let's say the ingredient, the 7th or the 8th ingredient, it says alcohol, gelatin, blood, any of these things. Since they're not from the 4 and 5, we don't we ignore it.
We're not concerned about that.
Right.
We don't worry ourselves about that. Now, for people, as I said, that want to follow and be the most stringent, okay, fine.
All right, sure.
But that's not mujma' alayh. It's not agreed upon. Because the same thing is when we're talking about clothing.
All right.
The clothing that we wear, the shoes that we wear, the items that our shoes and our clothing are made out of, the leather that we wear, the leather seats in our cars. All these types of things are made from certain things and other stuff. And the leather, it sloughs off. It gets on you. So now what do you do? If you don't acknowledge contaminants or the law of istibdaal, what do you do from leather seats that are made from pork skin that it sloughs off and gets on your clothes? What do you do then? Well, you think all the seats and all the cars that are made by the kuffar, they're all made from animals that has zabiha done. It was gazelle skin. That's not true. And even if they're gazelles, you think the gazelles were all slaughtered and what, according to zabiha? You think they're not meta? Because if it's meta, it's still najis. So then you sit in there and you've got your dress shirt on and your dress slacks and your shoes, and it's during the summertime, so you're sweating. That's on. So now it's skin to skin contact, and it's a wet surface too. How far you want to take this? With rejecting the principle of Istibdaal. So I'm not rebuking anyone. I'm just saying, think about it. The world that you want to live in.
And let's say, Sheikh, following the opinion that you're speaking of the Hanabila, if one takes a product and let's say the second or the third ingredient, it says E100, which is supposed to be pig fat. Now, in this case,
yeah, we don't do it.
Then
because the majority of the product.
That's the majority.
It's the majority or all of the product.
Then it basically becomes haram since
it's haram because it's the majority or all of the product. Right. It's not just permeating the product; it's the great bulk of the product.
Right. Yeah.
You can't consume that. You can't consume that.
And how did the Imam Ahmad look at it when he ate the cheese? Because obviously the ingredients didn't have it. So how did they look at
it? Because they knew how it was prepared.
Okay.
And when it was added. Right. So you have to know about food as well. To understand some of these things, you have to know about food, and you have to know how food is prepared and made. A lot of the time when we're talking to some of the people today amongst the Muslims, they don't know about food and they don't know how food is made. They also don't know how food comes to us. Some of the food that we eat is pollinated or germinated, or there's a symbiotic relationship between that fruit or veg and a haram animal in order to make the food that we get.
Yeah.
But we don't think about this. 70% of our fruit and veg is pollinated through the need of bees. Now, bees, what's our relationship to bees? Right? So then we have to start, it's like, what, you're not going to eat honey? You're not going to eat all the fruit and veg, because the bees will fly from different locations. They won't just have the pollen on their little feet. They got other stuff to pick up on their little feet too. That's contaminant again.
Allah.
We don't know what Pontifex Maximus, the bumblebee, was also tracking in when he flew. We don't know. He might have landed on feces for a moment. We don't know. And I don't want to know what Pontifex Maximus, the bumblebee, I don't want to know what he was, because I'm not going to be asked about that. I don't care what Pontifex touched. I don't care. Because there's certain things that happened with the contaminants of how things reached us today. The fact that the products that the honey comes from is coming from the bee, what we would call its rectum. We don't have any questions about that. From the rectum. You don't have any questions about that? I don't want to know. Responsible for that. I don't live in that world. I'm just not responsible. I have to live in the world. I have to live in the world.
Interesting.
I can't. An area that you would call a waste hole or whatever else, that the product that comes from there, okay, maybe it is. But by the time it gets to me, it's not that. That's not what honey is. Something else. Or the wax. We're going to talk about wax now? No. I'm not worried one way or another. But we have these ideas in our head, and we must divest ourselves from that. One of the things to do is that book, What's in the Food or What's in What We Eat. Another thing is to look online about how our figs germinated, and just start looking at this stuff, right? And start getting back to, like, maybe pick up some books on on different foods that grow throughout the year, like different fruit and veg throughout the year, because those books will explain. Because I've got under the book review section on the Jurjis blog the different foods that and what year. There's one that I've got on there. It's whole foods throughout the year and how they grow. And it tells you what the particular crop is, what years it grows in, what medicinal properties it has, and then also what it needs in order to grow. Like, does it have a symbiotic relationship with other animals? Does it need pollinate? Blah, blah, blah. All these other really good things, because it will help you understand more about the food that you eat. And that can also help you with your health as well. If people are like, oh, I think I have an allergy, but I don't understand why. Okay, well, with the food that you eat, that might be the key to your allergy. Well, I just take these antihistamines. Okay, but that's not really solving it. It's just blocking your body from making histamine. The question you have to ask is, why are you making so much histamine? If you find that out, you don't have to take antihistamine anymore.
Yes.
It's not haram to take antihistamine. I'm just saying, if you really want to solve it, because all you're doing by taking antihistamine is you're just blocking histamine production. That's fine, because it's a temporary cure. But wouldn't you rather find out what's making you make so much histamine? Then when you find out what that is, oh, let me just stop taking that, or let me take this to counterbalance it, then I'll stop making so much histamine. Then you're done. Then you don't have to worry about antihistamine, because if you go somewhere where you forget, then what do you do when you forget your tablets? Your eyes are red and itchy, you're sneezing a lot, your nose is running, your eyes swell up so you can't see so well. Wouldn't it be good to find out how to resolve that rather than worrying about the pill? Because if they get misplaced, if they don't have, because certain brands of antihistamine are stronger than other brands. What if you go to a country they don't have your one? Now for 3-4 days you could be bedridden, or you could be in a real bad state. So that's all I'm saying, is to have a better understanding and a better relationship with the food that we eat, to understand what's in the food that we eat. How does it reach us from the first time it grows out of the earth, or when it's pollinated, or when it's slaughtered, from that point all the way until it reaches our plate? What do we have? What's our relationship to it? And how much responsibility do we have from the process of it first growing all the way to it reaching our plate, knowing that we don't control the food supply? And a case in point I'll give you is, there was a huge scandal in this country, the United Kingdom, and it had to do with when the corporation Tesco made an announcement to the press that the spaghetti bolognese, you've heard of spaghetti bolognese?
Yes.
The spaghetti bolognese meals that they'd been selling in stores weren't actually beef, but they were horse meat.
Really?
Because during the time that they were making those spaghetti bolognese meals, there had been a shortage. And to compensate for that shortage, they added horse meat instead.
Oh, that's dangerous.
Now, I want you to understand this. Horse meat has a more distinct taste than beef. But because of how fast people's lives are and how quickly people eat nowadays, people wouldn't have even known it was horse meat unless Tesco came out and said, listen, we're really sorry, but we put horse meat. No one knew. Could you imagine? I'm sure if I had you eat baked chicken, that you could tell the difference between baked chicken and vegetables and lamb and vegetables. Yes. Well, that's about the same taste difference between beef. Texture is similar, but the taste, beef and horse meat, there's a distinct taste. They didn't notice because people are so busy. They're running around. They're so busy that they're eating fast. Their lunch break, they might only have 15 minutes to gobble something down and get back to work. And this is what makes me angry. It's not the people's fault. It's these organizations that make these people rush. It's not right what they do to these people. Now, think about that. If they made a mistake like that, what other mistakes are they capable of making in the food supply, which we also eat from? Every year, they talk about certain things that have gone into the food supply, the food chain.
Yes.
Because they say, oh, this incident occurred and this is in the food chain. So if anyone bought products such and such between this time and this time, please return it. If anyone's feeling sick, please contact this number and go to the hospital and seek immediate medical help.
Yeah.
Why? Because they control the food supply and the food chain. We have to understand that in realistic, clear, sober, and mature terms, so we can make the right decisions when we need to. That's all I'm saying. I want us to be mature and think these things through, not be alarmist, but also not be a fantasist either. You don't control your food supply. So what can you do to get the best out of your food supply to get the most wholesome food that you can? You have to make educated and intelligent decisions.
A specific actual ruling that I was wondering about when we speak about insects. What is the rule on consuming them, and also when they're also in the ingredients?
Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. So when we talk about insects, the Arabic word for them is hasharat, most of your creeping things. Locusts are mentioned as being halal in the ahadith, but the rest of the hasharat are khabith, okay? Based upon narrative in the Jami' al-Saghir of Imam Suyuti. So when you have insects that act as contaminants that have fallen into food, the same ruling for Hanabila and Malikis is in effect regarding the contaminants and Istibdaal, because this is necessarily the case when you're in factories by General Mills or Kellogg's where cereal is made. This is necessarily the case. So when this is the case, you have to exercise this principle. Well, you don't have to, but it's more prudent to exercise this principle, because the strictest position would have you avoiding nearly all breakfast cereals, as well as porridge and porridge oats. You would also have to avoid most nuts, specifically walnuts, pecans, macadamias, cashews, and chestnuts. You have to avoid those, like, in specifics, because they're almost always exposed to insects, either through infestation or when they're being packed. The insects wind up being smushed or crushed inside or alongside the shells or things like that. But they're in there.
And so, let's say, I mean, talk about the haram stuff. If there's blood or insects mentioned as a ingredient, the same principle applies, right? What we mentioned.
Same principle.
Right.
Same principle applies.
Okay. Excellent. MashaAllah. I was also asked about this question, if I could mention it. Specific foods. Now, the given example was chips. What if it has a bacon or a bolognese flavor? Since these are also foods which have pork and the likes in it.
Well, when you have chips that have a bacon or bolognese flavor, if it's permeated the product, like they were boiled in that oil, it's permeated the product.
Okay.
So now we go back to the hadith. If it's in a liquid, don't come near it, because it's permeated the product.
Right.
It's not like something that was added after the fact. It's something that these were boiled or they were deep fried in that material. So it's permeated the product. And so what's happened is it's become the thing that made it complete. It's cooked it, and it's become the main body and matter of that product.
Making it impermissible thereby.
Yes.
And does the same ruling apply on if you go to a takeaway and you buy something? I'm talking about
like a pizza.
Yeah.
Okay.
What if they added certain oils Now you won't know this necessarily in takeaway or shop. How to approach this situation where they use
All
haram
right.
oils?
So there are a number of issues now at work. All right. So let's talk about each one of them. First of all, you talk about going to a pizza shop to buy a pizza.
Right.
So, excuse me, they put pizzas in the oven, and there's haram and halal pizzas cooking in that oven. So your margarita pizza with pineapples is in there,
Yes.
cooking alongside your pepperoni and Canadian bacon. Now, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah.
Get it all out.
So when this occurs, what's happening is these two items are cooking, but if they're not touching where they're on top of one another or they're intermingled amongst each other, there's no issue to be concerned about, although they're in the oven, because the only thing that's happening is they're cooking in proximity of one another, but they're not, the product is not being directly affected to the point that it's becoming that product, right? Now it's come out of the oven, right? So the guys grabbed that flat ladle. He slid the ladle under your pizza, brought out Brother Iskander, order number 24. Brought Brother, this is Iskander Ghani. So he slid it in, brought it out, put it on. Now he's got the knife, and he's going to cut your pizza. Now the knife is also used for the Canadian bacon and the other pizza.
Yes.
Now, I'll say this caveat. In Subway restaurants and other ones, sometimes they have a green knife and a red knife, one for cutting veg and one for cutting meat.
Oh, interesting.
So, okay, you avoid it. What if he forgets?
Most likely.
What if he forgets? Okay, all right, let's talk about it. If it's set up to where there are vegetarian menus and everything else, and they handle them separately, and he makes a mistake, you're not accountable for his mistake.
All right.
Because you're paying for a product where you know that there's a vegetarian or other whatever option. It's not your fault that he forgot and made the slip. And the fact that he's using that knife to cut it, it's not going to be enough to permeate the whole product. There might be traces of it on there, but it won't be detectable to where we can separate it, or it's beyond the threshold that we can clearly taste bacon or the bacon's inside of it and it's made up the product of it.
Yeah.
Right? Now, when it comes to oils, if the product is being cooked in an oil, like fish are being deep fried in pork fat oil, or fries are being fried and fries or chips are being fried in pork fat oil, you can't consume this. Or if you know that products are being deep fried together, so it's like, all right, well, I only eat chips. It's like, yeah, but the guy doesn't differentiate between your chips that are being deep fried in the oil and the pork cracklings that he's throwing in.
Exactly.
So it's permeating the entire product. So you couldn't eat that. Right. But if he said every time he saw you come in, I'm going to change the oil, and he cooked just yours now, well, yeah, that's fine. But very few people are going to, because it's a very painstaking process to change the oil. But some people will do it, but most people won't. So there's a cafe I used to go to when I was in Oregon, and the woman would scrub the side of the grill that she was going to make my omelet on. Like, she would go out of her way to scrub it on. I didn't ask her to, but when she found out that I was Muslim, because I was only having milkshake, she's like, why don't you order something for me? We have a great selection of food. I said, well, I can't because of this. She said, well, the part of the grill I'm going to make your food on, I'll scrub it.
Subhanallah.
I was like, I don't want to put you in a house. No, listen, you need to try my omelet, because it was a shop that was at the back of their house. And she was adamant that she made the best omelet on the entire West Coast. That's 7 states. She's like, that's the best omelet. I'm telling you, I'm the best. So she said, I will scrub it. So she did that. And she would flip the toaster over, because the omelet came with toasts, and shake out all the previous dust and everything else. But she really went to a lot of trouble for me. So I would come in, and I would try to make sure to come in at the same time, so I didn't make a nuisance of myself. So I would come in, and I would order the omelet with the cheese and the toasts and the hash browns. And just that part of the stove is where my stuff was. So yeah, when you find people that do that, yeah, that's fine. Alhamdulillah, that's fine. But in circumstances where you order takeaway food and they have a facility in place for vegetarian or other type of food, you should not be thinking in your mind, what if they use the wrong knife? What if they, well, you can't do anything about, because you're not there. You can't ask him, hey, did you use the knife? You can't. He might remember, that's the takeaway driver. The takeaway driver might not be the guy that prepared your order. He just got the Deliveroo order. He doesn't know. I just drove from DoorDash. Do you want to know? He doesn't know anything about the restaurant, or he might not even be the guy from the restaurant. He just comes to the restaurant because a lot of the drivers, the delivery drivers, they're sourced out. They're third party. So he might not know, right? So we're not responsible for that. But you have to be mindful, yes, of what goes into preparing your product and the like, yes.
So to make this clear, when you go to a takeaway or a restaurant and you want to buy fish or fries, but if they use pig oil, then this is haram.
Yes, that's correct.
And this is due to it having permeated the fish or the fries.
That's correct. Now, you face a similar situation if they're using vegetable or olive oil, and then what's happened is they've cooked something haram in that oil.
Right.
Then they say, well, now we're going to throw your order in. Don't worry, it'll just be in the oil by itself. Yes, but what's happened is the pork that went in there permeated all throughout that oil.
Right.
So there's no way to now fix that situation unless you decide, or unless the person is nice enough to change the oil, or they say, listen, so some restaurants will say, listen, this oil here is the only oil we use for fries. We don't put anything else in here, or it's only used for our fish. We'll cook both your fries and your fish in this oil, right? You might be able to find that, right? But in the event where that's not the case, you will be putting yourself in a circumstance for consumption of that because of the permeated oil. So, and you have to be careful about that.
So simply said, if somebody would go buy these things, he would just keep in mind that make sure that it's not haram oil that's being used. And if it's halal oil, make sure that no other food is being dipped into it, which is haram.
That's correct. That's
All
correct.
Right. Then also, in regards to the same thing, I want to ask, how about when people add literally like alcohol? This could be wine, or this could be a bottle of alcohol. They sometimes add this in restaurants to foods.
Yes, when this is done, you should not consume this. Like when they add cooking sherry or things such as this, you should not consume this, because the alcohol has gone into like a salad with white wine dressing. So it's not vinegar, it's actually white wine that's been added, right? You shouldn't eat that because it's been given as an additive to food. Now, this reminds me of something that came up about vinegar. It just appeared in my mind. And it is, yes, we are not to take alcohol in order to create the process of which vinegar will be made. So we will buy vinegar from non-believers. But I was reading Imam Mustafa Ruhaybani rahimahullah just the other day in his Matalib ul-Nuha, and he said, however, if you took some grapes or some dates and you had vinegar, and then you added that vinegar water to the water with the dates and grapes to make more vinegar, you could do this, and that would avoid the process of using alcohol.
All right.
So you might find cases where there's Muslims that have made vinegar, but what they've done is they've taken the target of what they want to make the vinegar from, date vinegar or grape vinegar. And what they've done is they've taken existing vinegar that they purchased from unbelievers, then they've added it to water with those fruits and those things, and been able to create the vinegar process from that. They've made more vinegar using that. So that would be a permissible option as well. If someone did that, they wanted to make their own vinegar at home, they'd have to buy some vinegar, then they would have to add it to the things that they wanted to create more vinegar from. And the process of that would be a catalyst for making more vinegar. So that could be done. That's an option.
All right, mashallah. But when one will look also at alcohol, when it is added to foods, like it might evaporate, but still it permeates the food, right? The product.
Okay. Um, in a circumstance where you have uh, alcohol that's been added to
Yeah,
foods where
let's say like
it's,
intoxicants. Yeah.
yes, intoxicants. So what's happened is, especially when you're talking about things like cakes and pies, where it's often listed as liqueur, LACQUER, if memory serves me correct, liqueur. Now, what's happened there is either rum, cooking rum, or sherry or other
Yes.
things have been added to that product. Now, if you consume that product, you will undergo the same heady effects as if you drank rum by itself. Just as much as if you ate edibles where marijuana is mixed with brownies, chocolate brownies. If you eat those, you will experience the same soporific heady effects as if you smoked marijuana, right? So that's indicative of the fact that it's still kept its same power. It's not gone. It's not just a contaminant. It's maintained its same strength, its essence, and it's not undergone any istibdal, and it's made up, and it has to be most of the product because it's still producing the same effects. That's the indicative fact that it's not just a contaminant, it's not undergone istibdal, and it's making up the majority of the product because it's still producing the effects that it produces on its own. So that's the indicator that you better not have that. This is haram to have that.
Okay. Since you also just mentioned chocolate brownie, for those who don't know, what is that exactly?
What will happen is, okay, so making the brownie by itself, Duncan Hines often makes them. There's other organizations where you can buy the mixture. So what will happen is you might use a sheet where you have a baking pan. So you'll lay that in the baking pan. That's your base. Then the brownies will be, the actual chocolate will be laid on top of it. It looks almost like a cake. Then when you put it in the oven, it comes out, you section it into squares, and those become your brownies. Now, sometimes people will add into the mixture that's going to be their base. They might add chocolate chips or other things, or sometimes they add marijuana. So then they add that. And in which in that case, it'll be either be in its plant form, or sometimes they powderize it, or they might blend it all together. So then by the time it comes out of the oven, those elements have all been added together. They then section into squares, and now you have your brownies. So when people have those, they suffer the effects of what they had. Or in the case of making a cake, when you make a cake, they will add the liqueur into the mixture, which will either be either scotch or a weaker form of whiskey. So they'll add all that in there. It'll be in the mixture. Then when they're done, they'll create that. Then they create the frosting. And the frosting will also have cooking sherry or something else. Then they slide it in the oven, they bake it, they take it out. And it's often brought to bridal showers, baby showers, wedding parties. They often exchange these alcoholic cakes, what's called sometimes a rum cake. So they'll give you a rum cake, or they'll call it a humdinger cake, because the surprise of, because they don't tell you that it's got it in there. You don't realize until you've eaten it that, oh no, I've had this. So they have like a humdinger cake or a rum cake, and then you have that, and then you undergo the effects of having consumed intoxicants.
Oh, interesting.